Hello and welcome to the Royale podcast. I'm your host, Omar Abashib, and let's get started. So today I want to talk about preseason football, recap of what we learned from over the weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then answer a mailbag question. So let's go ahead and get started with our first preseason game. Talk about the Browns versus the Giants. So Barkley blew up Twitter with that first run. Brilliant jump cut, and you saw the explosion. I mean, he can't really improve his ADP that much more. I don't think he's going to jump into the top four. I think Bell, Gurley, Zeke, and DJ, in whatever order they go, are still going to stay as the top four. But, I mean, I think he could be going over Kamara in more drafts. You know, if he keeps putting on performances like that. We already knew how talented he was. He's of the David Johnson mold. He has a speed, power. He's a great route runner. He's an all-around talented back. So for me, I'm taking him over Kamara even before the run in the preseason. But that just solidifies, seeing him first carry NFL action, just showing that ability. Other than that, there wasn't too much to take away from the Giants offensively. The Browns, on the other hand, a lot more to talk about. First and foremost, Tyrod Taylor, of course, still running with the ones. Every time someone asks Hugh Jackson, he repeats, Tyrod's the starter. And while I do believe him, Tyrod has every chance to hold off Baker. Depending on their record, I mean, you have to figure Baker's going to start at some point this season. The problem is guessing when. I would take Tyrod early season. Say I'm taking Jameis Winston because of that upside. He has Deshaun Jackson, Mike Evans, O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate, Chris Godwin. He has some good options there. But he's suspended the first 3 games. I'd take Tyrod Taylor. He could play for me the first few games until James is back. And we have to remember, Tyrod, as long as he's playing with those weapons, with Josh Gordon hopefully coming back after, his little sabbatical, with Landry, I'm not the biggest fan of in terms of an NFL wide receiver, but I mean, he'll get you yards, and if he's getting yards, then he's getting, the quarterback yards as well. He'll help. Njoku looked very good. Whether he was playing with Tyrod or Baker, he caught a touchdown from each of them. Tyrod has that rushing ability as well. When he was playing with Buffalo, he didn't have that great of weapons other than Watkins. Woods was okay. But the weapons he has now, with Duke Johnson also as well, I forgot to mention in the backfield, he could be a very good quarterback. Especially, you're getting him as end of the draft quarterback, probably even undrafted in a lot of leagues. So that's just easy money. I'd take him. If we knew from right now that he was a starter for the entire season, he would probably be taken in the top 15 of quarterbacks because he has the rushing ability and he also has, good weapons. So he's good to roster as long as, and probably even start, especially in plus matchups, as long as he's the starter. The worry is he's probably not going to be the starter the whole season, so you have to be careful with that. He looked good, though. Baker came in. He looked fantastic, showed why he was the number 1 pick. Kept his eyes downfield, moved well around in the pocket. Found Callaway a bunch. Hopefully his story checks out about the drugs not being his because he's such a talented footballer. He could stay out of trouble. That's just another weapon on top of Landry, Njoku, Duke Johnson, Gordon for whichever quarterback is manning this offense. But he looked good. He had great chemistry. So Dynasty, great. You're not drafting Callaway for redraft purposes this year. I mean, you have to keep an eye on him, though, because something happens to Gordon, something happens to Landry, or even in 3-wide sets, he could be productive this year. But more so in dynasty leagues. Him and Mayfield for the foreseeable future, that's going to be a sight to behold. Njoku, as I mentioned earlier, he caught a touchdown from both Tyrod and Baker Mayfield, so he looks like he's going to improve. And a lot of people were disappointed in him last year because people figured he had an opportunity to get some fantasy points with the Browns not having any really good wide receivers. Kenny Britt got his money and said, he quit basically. He didn't really try. I mean, got 1,000 yards with Jeff Fisher, got paid from the Browns, and then called it quits. So they cut him, and then they were playing wide receivers like Ricardo Lewis, Rashard Higgins, people like that. But Hugh Jackson wasn't even using him enough. He was using Seth DeValve over him, which just shows how stupid Hugh Jackson is. And also, he's a rookie tight end. Tight end is probably one of, if not the hardest positions as a rookie to adjust to from the college game to the NFL. A lot of the tight ends are just used purely as a move tight end, just catching. You got to learn how to do your blocking and all that. It's just one of the harder positions in the NFL to learn, adjusting to the NFL game speed and all that. So, Evan Ingram was an exception. Everything went his way, and, they didn't really ask him to block or anything like that. But Njoku's a really talented tight end. He's a good tight end to take if, in the draft, if you don't want to spend the equity at the position, if, the cutoff usually is around Jordan Reed, and Trey Burton. You usually get him after that. So if you don't want to get one of those Gronk, Kelsey, Ertz, Ingram, Olsen, Rudolph, Delaney Walker, Jordan Reed, Trey Burton, one of those tight ends. I might have missed someone, not sure. But one of those guys, you get Njoku later. You get a lot of upside there. And then you can also get a better running back, wide receiver, or maybe even a quarterback in an early round instead of taking an early round tight end. So that's someone I would probably look to target because I usually wait on my tight ends. I've never really been take a tight end early. Maybe Gronkowski just because he's been such a force, only if he's healthy. So, but that's someone I like this year a lot, which is Njoku. The other note to mention was Nick Chubb and Carlos Hyde. It was pretty evident that Carlos Hyde's actually going to be the number one in that offense. So, Nick Chubb, as the season goes on, could take that job. But as of right now, it's Carlos Hyde's backfield. In terms of rushing, we all know Duke Johnson's still going to be the third down back. They extended him after they had just signed Hyde and drafted Chubb. So they obviously have plans for him. So that's the Browns-Giants. Moving on, next game we'll talk about is the Buccaneers versus the Dolphins. Tannehill returning to the field, after his injury that kept him out of the entire 2017 season. He looked pretty crisp to start the game. He only played for one drive, 4 of 6. Yeah, nothing to really write home about, but, just solid. Kalen Ballage, for all those Kalen Ballage truthers who, are hoping he can emerge from this backfield as a late round flyer. He played clearly behind Drake and Gore, who are listed as the co-starters. Problem is, Ballage also caused the fumble when his leg knocked the ball out of his own hands, which was kind of funny. On the flip side, Ronald Jones clearly played as the number 2. Peyton Barber drew the start, and he saw most of the work with the first-team offense. Ronald Jones only had 8 carries for 9 yards. He did score a touchdown, but Barber looked much better, and Jones dropped a pass as well. Derek Cutter came out today and said Peyton Barber is our starter. And now, that's for now. He's just saying Peyton Barber is our starter. Things could change between now and the start of the season and during the season. But people need to get on this Peyton Barber bandwagon as well. Ronald Jones is going as the 26th running back off the board in half PPR scoring. And that means he's a high RB3, a flex play. But he's not even a starter on his own team. That's somewhere around the 6th or 7th round. 2 running backs, 2 wide receiver leagues. Maybe a little bit later if you're in a 3 wide receiver league. Meanwhile, Peyton Barber is going as the 58th running back off the board, behind guys like Ty Montgomery, LeGarrette Blount, Latavius Murray, Devontae Booker. This is surely going to change, but as of right now, the average draft position among all the majority of the sites for half PPR, there is a 32 pick difference between Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones. And that's honestly just criminal. So people need to wake up. If you're drafting soon, you need to take Peyton Barber at the value that's given to him right now. He may not hold on to the job for the entire season, but as of right now, he is the starter. If you can get a starter as the 58th running back off the board, then you're golden. And if you draft him and he only holds the job on for 3 weeks, you take him, you sell high on him after a couple weeks. You have to understand, take the value when it's given to you. The next game I wanted to talk about would be the Saints and Jaguars. The game was pretty uneventful. Both teams started with scoring drives. Kamara drew the start, as we expect. Got a lot of work in the first drive, and then, didn't see him after that. Ingram sprinkled in on the first drive, but then he got some run with the second team offense. don't want to read too much into it, like he's that far on the depth chart. That's more to do with the suspension, I'd presume. So they want to get Kamara more reps with the first team. The more important running back situation to note from the Saints would be the battle between Jonathan Williams and Terrence West for the third running back spot, and that's only important for the first 4 weeks while Ingram's suspended. They could have a role for them in that offense if you believe what's coming out of the Saints organization, saying they don't want to, give Alvin Kamara 20 carries, which could make sense. They want to keep him fresh, use him more in the passing game as well. So Jonathan Williams has been out playing Terrence West according to camp reports, and that showed in the game. Williams had 4 for 26 and a touchdown line. West only had 10 yards on 5 carries, so Williams could be a real factor during that early season when Ingram is serving his suspension. Over on to the Jaguars, not a whole lot to talk about. Bortles looked pretty sharp. He's not the most glamorous quarterback, but year in and year out, he finds a way to creep up into top 13 quarterbacks. So even though he's not a real good real-life quarterback, he's usable in fantasy, especially 2 quarterbacks leagues. He's actually a pretty good second quarterback in a 2 QB league. Fournette looked good, 5 for 24, so he looks fresh. That they added Andrew Norwell to that offensive line, so obviously, and he's a great run blocker. They want to run the ball, play good defense, let Bortles not do too much. Fournette's a nice pick near the end of the first round. Moving on to the Steelers and Eagles, many of the starters actually sat out for both teams. The biggest noteworthy play from the starters was the Juju Smith-Schuster Moss, picked up right where he left off a year ago. Moss DB went down the field, 71-yard touchdown. The other situation we didn't to note in this game is the running back situation for the Eagles. We didn't learn much. Ajayi, Clement, Smallwood, and even Josh Adams, they all saw a similar opportunity, and they're all pretty good. Clement and Adams gained 30 yards rushing. There wasn't a whole lot to write home about for the running back situation. Hopefully, more can be cleared up. And obviously, everyone knows the third game of the preseason is usually where the starters play the most amount. And that's usually when the most important takeaways are given. But it's always noteworthy to talk about what you see in the first couple games as well. And even the last game, because the last game is about people who are trying to make the roster. And if people are playing in that fourth game, it's not a good indication for their usage in the upcoming season. Zach Ertz missed a game due to injury. And so rookie tight end Dallas Goedert got some running. And he looked good. Caught 4 balls, 66 yards, scored a touchdown. If anything were to happen to Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert would be walking into a pretty great situation for fantasy. He probably even has some standalone value, similar to Trey Burton last year in terms of 2 tight end sets. I think he may even have a little bit more upside than Trey Burton did last year. But yeah, so that's a name to keep an eye on, especially, obviously, those dynasty people out there. He's a great asset to have. But in redraft leagues, if anything happened to Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert would be more than capable to step up and fill into his shoes, and probably has a little standalone value as well. Moving on to the next game, the Colts and the Seahawks. Obviously, most important thing was the return of Andrew Luck. Say it with me. Andrew Luck is back and playing some football. His first game in quite some time, so it was good to see him on the field. A lot of people thought this might never happen. I mean, I wasn't one of those people. I always believed that he could come back. The reports weren't the best, but we're all glad that he's back. That's the best thing. He played just over a quarter. He led a couple of drives, and they both ended up in field goals. He was 6-9 for 64 yards, and you could see him targeting T.Y. Hilton. If you've been listening to the reports in camp saying pretty strong connection there, just back like nothing ever happened. Before Andrew Luck got hurt, T.Y. Hilton was, a low wide receiver 1. So if you do the 0 RB strategy that I mentioned on the last podcast, you could actually get T.Y. Hilton as your third wide receiver, which is pretty cool. Could have 3 wide receiver 1s. Have like Antonio Brown, AJ Green, and T.Y. Hilton. Just need to find this year's Kamara or Hurt in the late rounds, and then you're on your way to a fantasy championship if you do go that route. In terms of running backs, this was one of the situations I mentioned on the last podcast that was noteworthy. The competition between Marlon Mack, Jordan Wilkins, and Nyheim Hines. I failed to mention Robert Turbin, but he's just a guy. He's not that great. Hopefully they don't use him too much, but Marlon Mack went down with a hamstring injury. Now, that's important because these soft tissue injuries, they can linger. So you need to keep an eye on Marlon Mack and what's going to happen with Jordan Wilkins and Nyheim Hines. Who's going to step up and take use of their increased playing time, their increased reps in practice? Maybe one of them can jump Marlon Mack. That'd be interesting. I'd love it for it to be Jordan Wilkins because Nyheim Hines isn't projected to be an in between the tackles runner. He's more of a pass catcher. Jordan Wilkins is a complete back. If he could come out of this backfield as the go-to guy, Andrew Luck leading the offense, this is probably at least a top 10 offense. And we could be talking about this year's, obviously Kareem Hunt or Alvin Kamara, some late round rookie running back who was, not the first running back on their depth chart. He wasn't drafted to go into a situation like Saquon Barkley or something like that, but comes out on the other end as a top 10 running back. So keep an eye on that. Deion Kane, that's an unfortunate situation. He's a talented rookie, and he unfortunately tore his ACL. So that's sad news. We wish him a speedy recovery, and hopefully he's back healthy for next season. Moving on, for the Seahawks, the main issue to note is the case of the running back battle. Chris Carson versus Rashard Penny. Chris Carson got the first carry. He played with the ones. Penny played a little bit deeper into the game. Penny did get in on a couple carries with the ones, with Russell Wilson, but Carson got the first carry and Penny played a little bit deeper. Penny is a rookie, so it's understandable they want to give him a little more carries in live NFL action, but Carson got the first carry, and that's an indication that he's right now the one, and we need to keep an eye on that. That's it for that game. Moving on to the next game, Texans and Chiefs. Pretty uneventful game. The important notes to mention are Watson's back, returned from the ACL injury, only threw one pass, so not anything to write home about, but it's just good to see him on the field. Just like Luck, his presence on the field is a good sign, so that's good to see him out there. In terms of the backfield, Dante Foreman, still on the pup. Lamar Miller, as I mentioned, lost weight, looked better. He looks lighter, he looks quicker, and Watson is a running quarterback, even though he might not run as much because his first year off the ACLs, maybe starting off the season. Just the presence of him being able to run. Just a thought. For a defensive coordinator, you gotta account for 11 players. So opens up some running lanes for Lamar Miller. And we saw to start the season last year, he was pretty good with Watson. So he's a guy to keep an eye on who's going as the running back 23 off the board. So that's the end of the RB2 range. And the running backs going around him are Penny still going ahead of him. Mark Ingram, I'd rather Mark Ingram just because he has higher upside, in my opinion, after the 4 weeks. But still, Lamar is a pretty good option. Players going around Lamar, Sony Michel, who's dealing with injury problems. Dion Lewis, who's in more of a timeshare. Ronald Jones, who's not even the RB1 right now. Royce Freeman, we'll get to him later on, but still rather Lamar Miller. I like the value for Lamar Miller. He's a good RB2. Solid. Right now he's going as the end of the RB2. I like him as a mid to high RB2 if Watson's healthy and he can play similar to last year because that's what he was producing like last year. He has a better path to fantasy success than some of the running backs going around him. For example, Jay Ajayi is going ahead of him. Now, that offense is probably going to be a better offense because it'll be a higher scoring offense, I should say, just because they have a better defense, get him more turnovers, get him in more scoring opportunities. But J.J. has to compete with Darren Sproles, Corey Clement. Lamar Miller has nobody to compete with. As long as Dante Foreman is injured, if he stays on the pup to begin the season, that's 6 free weeks as clear and cut running back one on the depth chart. And he can produce low RB1 numbers, as he did last year. So he's pretty good value at the end of the RB2 range. Moving on to the other side with the Chiefs. Pat Mahomes drew the start with Alex Smith out of town in Washington. He completed 5 of 7 passes for 33 yards. He did miss Kelsey, though, down the middle, with an inaccurate throw. Just kind of shows some of the struggles he might go through. He's still a work in progress. He has a lot of talent, a lot of talent, but reports out of camp saying that he's throwing a lot of picks in camp, but you're going to take the good with the bad. I still like him for fantasy this year. I like him if you're waiting at quarterback and in a 2 QB league as my QB2. He has tons of upside, but don't take him at his ceiling. The whole point drafting is to draft players at their value rather than their ceiling, and Mahomes is currently going as the 16th quarterback off the board, ahead of guys like Dak Prescott, Derek Carr, Mariota, Smith, Mayfield. That's an okay range for me because it's kind of in the middle of where you're getting him as a steal and his ceiling. Maybe you want to take somebody like Alex Smith, who's proven to be a capable quarterback, or Dak Prescott, who's shown with Elliott and Tyron Smith playing, he can produce good numbers. As long as you're not reaching for him inside the top 12, inside a QB1 range, then you're okay. So make sure you're taking him at a value rather than a ceiling. There wasn't really much else to talk about in terms of that game, so let's move on to the next game. Packers and Titans. Rodgers didn't play, so nothing to talk about with him there. The most important thing out of Green Bay right now is the battle for the running back spot. Jamal Williams looked pretty good, though. I've always been more of a fan of Aaron Jones. I felt he was more of an efficient runner. He was a better runner, in my opinion. But, Jamal Williams, he gets fantasy production, efficient or not. And in the end of the day, that's what matters. And if he's out there on the field on a team that is led by Aaron Rodgers, that team is probably going to be a top 5 offense, and that's a running back I want to own. So if he's getting reps with Rodgers and the ones, I want to own him. So he could build out himself out a role while Aaron Jones is suspended the first 2 weeks. So we need to keep an eye on that throughout the rest of the preseason. The other position to look at is the third wide receiver on the Packers. So number 1 is clearly Devontae Adams, and the second wide receiver is Randall Cobb. So we want to look at who's going to be the third wide receiver coming on for 3 wide sets when Randall Cobb gets kicked into the slot. That person, whoever it may be, could be very productive. We've seen third wide receivers be productive in the past for the Packers with Aaron Rodgers at the helm. That's where Devontae Adams started out his career, when he was behind Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb. We've seen James Jones behind Jordy Nelson and Greg Jennings score 14 touchdowns. So a wide receiver 3 role is very valuable in this type of offense. So the battle is between Geronimo Allison, who had the leg up from being on the team last year, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Equanimeous St. Brown. Those are probably the top 3 contenders for the job. Marquez Valdes-Scantling put up a 5 for 101 in a touchdown game. He balled out. Equanimeous St. Brown also played very well. He had a 4 for 61. Not as well as Scantling, though. Another one to keep an eye on is Jake Kummerow, who had 3 for 76 and a touchdown. So got to keep an eye on that throughout the preseason. Whoever wins this could be very valuable come regular season time. It was funny to hear Rodgers say that he thought some of the team's younger wide receivers were piss poor during one of the practices ahead of this preseason game. So it's interesting to think about who he was talking about, because you want to have Aaron Rodgers' trust as a wide receiver so you can get the ball. On the other side, we had the Titans. Derrick Henry got the first look in terms of rushing. He had the first carry and the second carry as well. Dion Lewis came in, though, for the third carry. So he looked like he was going to get some work on early down carries as well. But it's going to be more Henry and Lewis handle the important third down roles with the first team offense. So it's as we suspected. Lewis is going to get third down and be sprinkled in with the first and second down. And Henry's going to be primarily first and second down, short yardage, goal line situation. Both can be valuable. Henry more so in a standard and Dion Lewis more so in a PPR league. But it all comes down to how successful this offense is, how much of a step forward they take under Matt LaFleur. As long as they're a more successful offense, that's going to breed more opportunities for rushing, more opportunities for the running backs. Moving on to the next game, Ravens versus Rams. This was a landslide in terms of the Ravens. It was 33-3. second game in 8 days for the Ravens. The Rams were missing Goff and Gurley, so Lamar Jackson looked much better than in the Hall of Fame game. He showed more control, more pocket poise. He had a nice touchdown run showing what he did very well in Louisville. He scrambled out the pocket, made the defensive lineman fall on his legs, juke a linebacker, and then defensive back. Robert Griffin also looked pretty well, back-to-back games. Interested to see what he does there. They could look to maybe trade him or just keep him on the roster as a mentor towards Lamar. But that's also an interesting thing to consider because right now everyone's assuming maybe Flacco sucks, which he looks like he's going to be better, especially with the addition of John Brown. They seem to have a very good connection, and Flacco's talking about him glowingly. But if anything were to happen to Flacco, maybe injury, or if he was looking very bad, and they wanted to plug in another quarterback, right now it's probably Robert Griffin, the one coming in. So we need to keep an eye on that. It's not for sure that Lamar Jackson is the second quarterback up on that roster. So we need to keep an eye on that. Rams side, nothing really to talk about. No Goff, no Gurley, as I mentioned. Nothing to really discuss fantasy related. Moving on to the next game, Patriots-Redskins. A lot of the key starters sat out. No Brady, no Smith, no Gronk. Oh, this is another sad portion of the podcast. I was just talking about how much I was starting to really like Darius Geis. And he tore his ACL. Oh man, this I'm heartbroken about this. Hopefully he recovers. Man, that's such a shame. Hopefully he's back for next season, healthy. Such a big blow. I mean, we have to talk about it. Robert Kelly, Samaje Perine, they're both not really good running backs. And Chris Thompson's not healthy. It's not a great situation in Washington. They're saying right now that they don't want to bring anyone in, but that could change. We need to keep an eye on that right now. Of the two, if they don't actually bring anyone in, Robert Kelly's the lead one right now. He actually got the first carry of the game over Darius Geis, so I don't know why. But yeah, he ran more with the ones. Although Perine was 7 for 31, Kelly was 4 for 6. But we take that with a grain of salt. Kelly ran versus more of the ones and Perine more of the twos. But we'll see how it shakes up in the next coming weeks. And maybe they'll bring someone in, maybe not. We'll see what's coming out of camp, who's running with the ones. On the other side of the ball, the Patriots, obviously they didn't play Tom Brady, who reportedly afterwards we found out had a little bit of a back issue. Gronkowski didn't play either. For the Patriots, there wasn't much to talk about, although the one thing we wanted to talk about was the running back. Jeremy Hill looked pretty good. He showed a lot more, definitely, than last year, and he did show some stuff, in the receiving game that you haven't really seen much out of. Jeremy Hill really looks like he's going to be the third running back after Michelle and Burkhead on this roster. Mike Gillislee has an uphill battle if he's trying to make the roster, because you'd assume Ben Bolden's going to make the roster because of his special teams contribution. Now, Gillislee wasn't bad. He was 14 for 43, but Hill was 11 for 51 and scored a touchdown, and he just looked great doing it. Now, on another note, Jeremy Hill could be a sneaky touchdown upside guy. Burkhead was used there last year in the red zone, but Jeremy Hill is a big back. He's shown to be a capable goal line back in previous seasons with the Bengals. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's brought in goal line packages. So we need to keep an eye on that in the next couple of weeks in camp, in the preseason, and even during the regular season, because you never know with Belichick. As we like to say in the fantasy industry, Bella tricks, especially at the running back position. So got to keep an eye on that. Moving on to the next game, 49ers and Cowboys. The main thing that we saw was the Cowboys starting off a little bit hot. Prescott found Michael Gallup for a 30-yard score. Cornerback seemed to lose the ball in the sun, but that's one of Michael Gallup's best attributes is his tracking the ball. So that was good to see. And it's good to see Dak targeting him. Right now he's still the wide receiver 4 technically on the roster with Williams, Hearns, and Beasley ahead of him, but you don't anticipate that staying like that for too long, so want to keep an eye on him moving up that depth chart throughout the rest of the preseason, how he plays in camp, and hopefully he goes into that wide receiver 1 role because he's the most talented wide receiver on that roster. Terrence Williams, just a guy. Allen Hearns is not bad, but he's not really that great, and Cole Beasley's a slot guy. They say they want to play him more outside, but how much can you really play him more outside? He played about 13% of snaps from the outside last year. He can't really play 70% from the outside. When they say more, maybe they want to go 15, 20%, but not a whole lot. He's a slot guy. On the other side of the ball, Matt Breida, George Kittle came down with injuries, so hopefully they're okay. They're supposed to be back by week 1. They're going to miss the rest of the preseason. McKinnon also got hurt in practice recently. Luckily, it's not too bad. He's only should miss like a week. Hopefully he'll be back after that. Nothing to really talk about much in that game. Moving on to the next game, Panthers-Bills. Most interesting thing coming out of this game was actually the pregame altercation between Kelvin Benjamin. Cam went to talk to him about presumably the comments Kelvin Benjamin made to the media about being drafted to the Panthers and how that was bad for his career and whatnot. Cam tried to shake Kelvin Benjamin's hand, Benjamin having none of it. Benjamin looked like a total douche, to be honest, in the whole situation, and Cam, towards the end of it, was, like, okay, all right, I'm out of here. And kind of seemed pretty angry about the situation, but he moved on. In terms of the game, Kelvin Benjamin actually ended up scoring a touchdown. They traded for Corey Coleman, but Kelvin Benjamin still should be the number 1. And you can't teach 6'5" and being that big like Kelvin Benjamin, so he's a red zone target, obviously. Nathan Peterman got the start, which is pretty interesting. And then A.J. McCarron came in after that, not Josh Allen. Josh Allen was the third one, and he threw a touchdown, but he made some pretty boneheaded decisions as well. In terms of Nathan Peterman, honestly, I wanted to say I've felt like he's always gotten a raw deal. He was never meant to start last season. He never should have started. That was stupid on the Bills' part. Stupid decision by Sean McDermott. Tyrod should have stayed the starter. And so he got pressed into action when he wasn't ready. And 2 of the interceptions, I know he's threw 5 interceptions, in the first half, but 2 of the interceptions were actually tipped. Those were one of the first couple, and that kind of throws your confidence out of loop in the first NFL start, and you start making boneheaded decisions, you start forcing stuff. I mean, I don't want to make all the excuses because, 5 interceptions are 5 interceptions, but a couple of them are tipped. It starts spiraling after that, and he should have never started. He actually looked pretty good in this game. I know it's preseason, don't want to take too much into it, but he looked pretty good. So that's good for him. I'm hoping he gets another chance. Josh Allen definitely needs to sit back and wait because he has some accuracy issues that he really needs to clean up. And that touchdown I mentioned earlier with Kelvin Benjamin actually came from Nathan Peterman. So, yeah, Nathan Peterman played very well. On the other side of the ball, with the Panthers, Cam Newton was 6 of 9 for 84 yards. He was solid. The noteworthy things coming out of that game was McCaffrey looked good. They gave him a good amount of touches. He had 4 carries for 11 yards, which wasn't great, but he also had catches out of the backfield. He was 2 for 29, and he got a red zone carry, which was a good sign to see. I know it's preseason, but if he could get more red zone carries than he did last year, that would be a huge boost for his value because right now he's more of a PPR asset, but if they can give him more work near the goal line, he can get more touchdowns. That would be huge for his value. And they've been talking about they want to give him 25 touches a game. That's not going to happen because 25 touches a game over 16 games season, that's 400 touches. And only one running back did that last year, and that's Le'Veon Bell. And they're not going to give Christian McCaffrey a Le'Veon Bell-sized workload. But if he could get, 18 to 20 touches a game, let's say 20 on the higher end, maybe 14 carries, 6 catches, that's 320 touches a game. If you told me right now that Christian McCaffrey could last a 16-game season with 320 touches, then he's being undervalued right now. So the main thing that they're really saying to me is they want to get him more involved, more than last year. I don't believe 25 touches, but I do believe he'll be more involved than he was last year. And if he's more involved, most importantly, near the goal line, that's what's most important. I still think C.J. Anderson is going to be the one involved near the goal line just because of their size. And you have to remember, Panthers have the best goal line back in the game, and that's Cam Newton. Year in and year out, he snipes touchdowns from your running back, so you're going to have to anticipate that if you're a Christian McCaffrey or even a C.J. Anderson owner. So moving on to the next game, we'll talk about the last Thursday game, which was the Bengals and the Bears. The Bengals cut Brandon LaFell, and he had 100-plus targets over the past 2 seasons. That did include A.J. Green getting hurt, but he still did get those targets. So the number one option to take most of those targets is going to be John Ross. And I talked about John Ross on the last pod. If you have John Ross and he's playing and he's getting snaps, he's someone I want to take a late round flyer on because you don't teach 4.22 speed. He's going to affect the entire offense. And so you want to get someone like that, especially in best ball leagues. If those of you out there who play best ball leagues, and best ball is where you draft the entire roster. You don't worry about trades. You don't worry about injuries, waiver wires, any of that. You draft a team, and it plays your best lineup each and every week. That's where players like John Ross, Deshaun Jackson, Mike Wallace, those burners that have high peaks and low valleys, their good games are spread out throughout the season. That's where they're the most valuable because the weeks they hit, they're going to be in your starting lineup. Anyways, John Ross is a great late-round flyer because someone needs to get those Brandon LaFell targets, and John Ross is really talented, especially Dynasty. You want to keep him in Dynasty. Hopefully Marvin Lewis is gone after this season. They can get a creative offensive mind in there. He got 5 targets in the game. He only caught one of them, and one of the targets did lead to an interception. He stumbled down, but still the first game of the preseason. As long as he's getting opportunity, I'm interested in that. With the Bears, the offense still a work in progress with Trubisky and Matt Nagy. So not too much worried about that. It's still the first week of the preseason, but just wanted to mention that. Not much to take away from this game. Moving on to the Friday preseason games. The Falcons played the Jets. Falcons went scoreless. Don't really care about that. The more important fantasy implications came from the Jets side of things. Bilal Powell, who's going, might I say, criminally underrated in fantasy drafts, coming off as the 63rd running back off the board, while Crowell is coming off as the 36th running back off the board. And with Elijah McGuire injured, Powell is definitely going to be the receiving back there, and he actually ran most of his snaps with the ones. Crowell only came in after Powell. He did score a touchdown, but that was after Bilal Powell had played most of the reps with most of the first-team offense. And then Crowell actually did get hurt, I have to mention, on that touchdown. But I'm assuming he's going to be okay. It didn't look like it was anything too serious. In terms of quarterbacks, McCown only threw 1 pass, connected for 4 yards. Bridgewater looks sharp, and you've heard all offseason they're looking to trade him. He was 7 of 8 for 85. He's putting on a good show if they're trying to trade him. Darnold as well looked very good. 13 of 18 for 96 yards and a touchdown. The touchdown, if you looked at the series, was pretty good. Went a couple times, tried to score a touchdown. Wide receiver dropped the pass, then he got called for a flag on the next play, which they did score, so it got called back. Stayed with it, then ended up scoring a touchdown on a drive. And now, if you listen to the reports, he's getting more reps with the first team in camp, most of the reps. He needs a lot of catching up to do in terms of practice reps because he had the whole contract dispute, contract holdout. Now he's getting a lot more reps. McCown probably still starts out the season as a starter, but I wouldn't put any money on it. Bridgewater is probably going to be traded. But Darnold definitely is going to get some running this year, earlier than probably any of the other quarterbacks, I probably think, unless Sam Bradford got hurt and Josh Rosen has to step in. But I think he's probably going to be the rookie quarterback that's first to start for his NFL team. Moving on to the next Friday game, the Lions versus the Raiders. And it won't show up in the box score, but Marshawn Lynch looked like he got a little fountain of youth in him. Had a 60-yard touchdown called back due to penalty, but the noteworthy thing was he looked like the beast mode of old. He looked quicker, which was a good thing, and we know he's definitely going to be breaking a bunch of tackles. On the flip side, Kerryon Johnson, man, I'm a big fan. He looked really good. He didn't start the game, though. It was the Garrett Blount who started. He went 5 for 21, so he was pretty solid. And he's probably going to be the red zone back, obviously, with his big stature. Not too far off removed from league-leading 18 touchdowns with the Patriots. So he's probably the number one running back there, as well as the goal line back. But Kerryon Johnson looked fantastic, albeit versus the second-teamers. He was 7 of 34, but he looked very good. His vision, his acceleration, his burst, all of it. Man, he's the total package. Amir Abdullah played pretty decent, but he's also being used on special teams. He seems to be the odd man out. Theo Riddick's going to be used on third downs. Kerryon Johnson's also going to have a little bit of a role in that as well. So even if he's not getting the goal line back, he should offer some PPR value. But Kerryon Johnson's the most talented back on this roster. Dynasty purposes, he's a great person to own, and hopefully by the end of this season, he's a 3-down back because he's the best running back on this roster. Moving on to the Saturday games, we had the Cardinals and the Chargers. David Johnson had a couple of carries, and he looked like he was back, and he didn't miss a beat. He had 2 carries for 28 yards, and if this O-line can be somewhat decent and, they can get some good quarterback play, I honestly would not be surprised if he ended the season as the RB1. The biggest issue right now is that his offense isn't projected to be a good offense. Todd Gurley with Sean McVay, the Rams offense, that's going to be a really good offense, and the Steelers with Antonio, Big Ben, they're going to be good offense, and that's why they're going 1-2, whichever way you slice it. So if this offense is a little bit better than expected, I wouldn't be surprised, man. I'm telling you, David Johnson is a baller. He's a top 2 running back in this game. He's a better running back than Todd Gurley. You can spam my Twitter. I really don't care. Le'Veon Bell, for me, preference number 1. David Johnson is number 2. And actually, it's more of a 1A, 1B. Todd Gurley is going to be the 3rd best running back. And honestly, if the Cowboys knew how to use Ezekiel Elliott and actually used him in the passing game, they got him a good offensive mind like Sean McVay, not that idiot Jason Garrett, who needs to go. But if they had a good offensive mind that used him in the passing game, I would definitely put him ahead of Todd Gurley. But for now, I have Gurley 3 and Bell 1A and David Johnson 1B. So, yeah, I'm loving David Johnson. So, I still don't feel bad if I miss out on Le'Veon Bell or Todd Gurley because David Johnson's going to get a whole lot of carries, whole lot of receptions, and he's still going after 1,000. So, I'm happy with him. Now, his backup, who you need to keep an eye on, who you should be taking over a kicker or defense in the last round, is going to be Chase Edmonds. He's profiles to be a really good 3-down back. And if you haven't seen his touchdown from the preseason game, go watch it. He kept fighting and fighting. He showed great strength and resilience, kind of like a beast mode-esque type touchdown where you thought he was down, but he stayed with it and he ended up plowing into the end zone. Yeah, I like Chase Edmonds. If anything ever happened to DJ, you want to have your hands on Chase Edmonds. So he's a good late round flyer. Just in case anything happens between now and the season, take him over a kicker or a defense. Same thing with John Kelly having the backup to Todd Gurley. Do not take a kicker or a defense. It's a waste of time, waste of a roster space. You can pick up one the day before the season starts. There's plenty of them available. And on the other side of that matchup, the Chargers, not much for the first team offense, but wanted to mention Austin Eckler looked pretty good. So if anything happened to Melvin Gordon, same thing with John Kelly and Chase Edmonds. You want to have your hands on this guy. Take him at the end of your draft as a late round flyer or as a handcuff. He's entrenched as the backup to Melvin Gordon. Some people thought it might be rookie Justin Jackson, but he's been sidelined with a hamstring injury, so he's losing out on important reps. Austin Eckler really looks like a high upside backup running back that you want to own. The other Saturday game and the last game we're going to be reviewing is the Vikings and the Broncos. For the Vikings, Kirk Cousins looked good. He showed good rapport with Stephon Diggs, who is the best wide receiver on that roster. It's not Adam Thielen, it's Stephon Diggs. And hopefully Kirk Cousins this year targets him enough and Stephon Diggs, hopefully, knock on wood, can stay healthy. He will show the world how good he can be. There was no Dalvin Cook, no reason to risk him this early. But Latavius Murray looked good, and he's been talking about he's just not going to sit down and give Dalvin Cook the job, which obviously that's what you want to hear. But, still project Dalvin Cook to be the 3-down back. The only cause for concern is Dalvin Cook could lose out some goal line carries to Latavius Murray. So that's something I really want to see. If Dalvin can play the third week of the preseason and they have a red zone situation, who gets that red zone carry? That's what I want to see from that offense. On the Broncos side, Case Keenum didn't really play well. He was 1 for 4 for 5 yards, but it's only one game, not to worry about it. Paxton Lynch, he was terrible. He was 6 of 11 for 24 yards and a pick. He got passed up by Chad Kelly today as the number 2. Yeah, what a waste of a draft pick. And it's funny that Jerry Jones was mad and lost sleep over not being able to get him, and he got lucked into Dak Prescott. So, yeah, keep an eye on Chad Kelly, though, former Mr. Irrelevant. If anything happened to Case Keenum, he looked pretty good. He's not a bad quarterback, but don't really need to worry about him for right now. The more important thing is the running back battle between Royce Freeman and Devontae Booker. Devontae Booker got the first carry of the game on the first drive with the first team offense, but he didn't really do much. 2 for 7. Royce Freeman, on the other hand, he had 4 carries for 38 yards and a 23-yard touchdown, which was very nice. He's the best back on that roster. receiver. Booker is going to be more involved in the passing game than Royce Freeman. But in terms of touchdown upside and rushing yards, Royce Freeman is the best back on that roster. He should get more of the carries, and he should pass up Devontae Booker in no time. And like I said, Case Keenum had a bad day, so nothing to talk about with Demaryius Thomas or Emmanuel Sanders. So that's the recap for all the preseason games. So I wanted to go into a mailbag question to wrap up the show today. And I got a question over on Twitter from Thomas at Mistafx, Mistafx, and he asked me, because the podcast is mainly about a 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, his question was, how does your draft strategy change, because a lot of leagues are also doing 3 wide receivers instead of 2 wide receivers. And for me, the draft strategy doesn't change too much, because if you think about it, if you're going into a league where you're now doing 3 wide receivers and only 2 running backs, a lot of your league owners are going to think, well, I need to get a wide receiver early and get set at the position. Now, that's going to leave value at the running back spot. So if you think about it, if more of the wide receivers go early, if you have Hopkins, Odell, Julio, Thomas, and like maybe even Keenan squeeze in to the first round because they passed up running backs like Fournette, Gordon, and Hunt, I can double up and get like Melvin Gordon and Leonard Fournette at the back end of a draft, or maybe even like Kamara, and somehow you get a good running back to fall for you, because some teams might start taking like Keenan Allen if he didn't go in the first, and like maybe Devontae Adams. I still probably go running back in the first round. It really depends on the situation. I'm not going to force it, but more often than not, I'll probably go with the running back, because it doesn't really change it too much in the top rounds. Maybe a few more wide receivers go, but then that means I can actually get value at running back, and I could start off a draft maybe getting like Barkley at the 6th, and then maybe McCaffrey in the 2nd round, and then it pushes Joe Mixon all the way to the middle of the 3rd round when he should be go end of 2nd, maybe early 3rd, and a 2 wide receiver league, I can get Mixon in the middle of the 3rd. Then I have 3 maybe RB1s, and I talked about in the last pod that maybe if I started a draft, like I could get this, but now we're talking about getting it in the middle of the draft, which is awesome. And then I can make up the ground at wide receiver later, because there's more wide receivers in the NFL than there are running backs that start. So you have to remember that when you're going into your draft. So I can get later wide receivers. DJ Moore, who, sorry, I forgot to mention earlier when I was talking about the Panthers, he had a pretty good game, 4 for 75. He's looking the part. I like him this year in fantasy. So I can get someone like him, or Anthony Miller, who's entrenched into that slot role in the Matt Nagy offense, or I can get someone who touchdown upside like Will Fuller later on, Mike Williams, touchdown upside in a good offense. I can live with a little bit lesser at wide receiver if I'm having 3 RB1s. So like I've always said, I'm more comfortable making up ground at wide receiver, just because, you can have more options, because there's a lot more starting wide receivers. And I didn't even mention, like, you can get that Julian Edelman later on at a value, and then you made your ground up once he comes back, and you still have your 3 RB1s. So that's how my strategy would be in a 3 wide receiver. I could take a wide receiver in the 1st round, but that's like maybe if Antonio Brown fell to me. Honestly, it just depends on the draft board, but I'm most likely taking a running back if I had to give you a definitive answer right now. Thank you for that question, Thomas, and that should wrap up today's edition of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Less than 4 weeks away to real NFL football. Can't wait. Until next time. Y'all don't really